All right, so welcome for another edition of Tanya Tuesday. Today we are excited to do chapter 31, the next part of chapter 31. So we have to recall where we are up to. We are on a journey starting in chapter 29, discussing someone who has tried the Tanya's tried and true tested ideas, which is using meditation, contemplating, thinking about God, and that should then make us want to connect to God. So very simple. You work on your spirituality, you learn about God, you meditate about God, you study about a mitzvah, you meditate about a mitzvah, and that should make you want to do it. But as many of you may know, it doesn't always work, right? It doesn't always work. So in this chapter, in the last two chapters, he said, well, if it doesn't work based on the Zohar, what you might need is a self-deflating session. It might be that your ego is too large. It might be that you spend too much time eating pizza, and just simply spirituality and physicality are two opposite ends of the spectrum. So it's very possible that you've spent too much time focusing on your body, and then you try to wake up one morning and say you want to meditate and be spiritual, and sorry, but it doesn't work like that. See, some meditation that some people do is where they want to, where it's a focus on themselves. They want peace and quiet. That meditation doesn't require any level of spirituality. We're talking about a place where you can reach and feel a connection to God. And if that's the case, coarseness and too much focus on self is not going to work. So you can have a very egotistical person who can say that they meditate and they quiet their mind, and sure, that can work. But if you are trying to get to a religious place, that may not work. And so he gave these ideas of having self-deflating sessions. And in chapter 31, we started to talk like this. We started to say, well, we have a problem. We have a problem. If you're going to spend time doing self-deflating sessions, you might get sad. So we explained last week that number one, you might get sad, but the real sadness only lasts in the beginning. All right? The real depression. And you need to break the klipa, to break the unclean forces, you need to use something that's like it, so to speak. As I said, it takes one to know one, But then we said the second step is much deeper than that. The second step is that true Jewish sadness is a energizing sadness, a sadness that makes you want to do something. As I said last time, if your sadness is focused on I'm a failure and I'm bad and I'll never manage to reach anything, then you won't get anywhere. But if you're sad about where you are and a focus on where you want to get to, that's an energizing sadness. And that was the second point, is that we have to make sure that we take our sadness and we make sure to transform it to an energized sadness, a sadness that will make sure that we do something about it. And if I were to, the Tanya is going to continue along this theme this week, and we're going to talk about more the second step. So last time we spoke more about the two stages of sadness. Number one, true sadness only lasts for a moment, but you need that true sadness in order to break the klipa within your soul, it's in your body. And then we said, second of all, the type of sadness that you're going to have is going to be more of a bitterness, a energizing sadness, like you're kind of bitter about where you're up to in life. And this week, we're going to talk about how we ultimately transform it into joy. And that's going to be today's class, because we don't want to stay, even in the energized sadness, we don't want to stay there. Because ultimately, in order to accomplish your life's mission, even if you're in an energized sadness, it's a negative energy. And negative energy is not where you're going to ultimately get the most spiritual benefit. Okay, so what I'm saying now is a very important point, because this is the Hasidic outlook. You might find other Jewish groups who love the negative energy to propel you forward. In Hasidic philosophy, Chabad Hasidic philosophy, we don't want to be there. Even in the positive type of negative energy, we don't want to sit there. We use it as necessary, and then we snap out of it right away. And that is going to be what the rest of this chapter is about. It's going to be about, how do I move on? In other words, if the self-deflating session that I spent is real, in other words, if there's a real reason to be sad, then how can I be happy? That's really what the rest of this chapter is going to answer. In other words, even if you admit that yes, we don't want to stay in the negative energy, we want to stay in the positive energy. But if what I've said till now is true, assuming I'm not lying to myself, assuming there are real reasons to deflate my ego, assuming there are real reasons that I'm not so good, assuming there are real reasons to be sad and unhappy about my situation, which I think all of us can probably relate to. There are good reasons to be unhappy about our situation. How can I be joyous nonetheless? And again, this comes from the Chabad Hasidic philosophy opinion that even negative energy that can have a positive effect is not a place to live in. And why do I say that? Because you can find a lot of places online and a lot of rabbis online who love to spend the time on that. And it's not really the time. Even your Chabad rabbi, you might find once in a while, maybe if he gets drunk on Purim or something like that, he might tell you off. But generally, we don't like to hang out in the negative energy and talking about punishments and talking about reasons why you're so bad. We want to talk about the positive. But the question is, how can we actually talk about the positive when it's really so bad? They tell in Chabad, they used to tell a story of this bird. It's one of these parables. They say it at Farbring in a Hasidic gathering. So this parable goes like this. It says they tell a story of a bird who was walking around and very cold. It was a cold day, and so the bird was very cold. I was very upset that it was very cold, and it's walking along, and then it stops, and then suddenly, when it stops, this dog crouches over it and lets go of its entire big intestines, and it drops it all on this little bird. And now the little bird is covered in dog feces, but it's warm. And so the bird starts to sing. I'm a chaya, Baruch Hashem. Thank Hashem, I'm warm, I'm not cold anymore. And they used to say this at the Farbrengens is, how can you sing when you're covered in well, they used to say in the Yiddish, in drek. If you're covered in drek, why are you singing? So one way of looking at that parable is sometimes we're so covered in the physical things of our lives. Why are we singing? Why are we so joyous? Why are we so happy? What's so what are you singing about? It's not that great, You're covered in pizza and movies and whatever other pleasures of the world that there are. Why are you singing? Where's the real positivity in your life? Not saying those don't have a place, but where's the real positivity in life? But I'm taking it for today's class in a different manner. I'm taking it is that, let's say I do have positive things in my life, so there is a reason to sing, but I'm also at the same time covered in dirt. In other words, we all have this two sides to the coin, unless you're a tzaddik or a beinoni, which none of us are. As long as you're a regular person like me and you, and I know you don't look at me and think I'm a regular person, but I'm generally a regular person, okay? As long as you're a regular person like me and you, we'll always have these two sides of our lives. We'll have the things we do good and the things where we're, so to speak, covered in drek. The parts of our lives where we're nothing to write home about. Let's call it that, right? Nothing too positive. We're getting through life. It might be fun, but from a spiritual perspective, it ain't that great, right? It's not that great. And so that's going to be his question: is how can you truly be happy if really you are covered in drek? And his answer is going to be focused on the word mercy. Focused on the word mercy. So who do you have mercy on? And well, I don't know if the word mercy, let's use the word pity. Let's use the word pity. Who do you have pity on? You only have pity on someone who has the ability to not be in a place where they are, and they are there nonetheless. In other words, I have pity on a talented person who's wasting away their life. I have pity on a human being who's rolling in the mud. I don't have pity on a pig that's rolling in mud, because a pig is supposed to be rolling in mud, right? And so his answer here is going to be starting with pity. He used the word mercy, but in English, the word mercy doesn't evoke really what I'm trying to bring out. I want to focus on the word pity. So what he's going to say is like this. He's going to say the sadness that you have is more of like a pity. And why is that important? Because In other words, the sadness that you have over your spiritual state is more of like a pity. You pity yourself. Why is that important? Because that means when you have pity on something, you also believe that you are also able to do more. You have the ability to accomplish more. We have pity, exactly, you can grow. We have pity on ourselves because we know that we have a godly soul that is capable of a lot more. So I can look at myself and be sad. I can look at myself as being bitter. And now I'm going to look at myself and have pity. Pity only applies when you look at somebody that is able to do more, right? Again, classic story, your classmate who's ruined their lives, where you have pity. It's like, it's sad because they could have done so much more. So we have pity in our souls, but we're still alive. So that means we have the ability to do more. And so this is his first reason to, so to speak, be happy to some extent. It's the first step of changing over our outlook. When we contemplate the fact that, yes, our soul is covered in dirt, our soul is languishing, our soul is not reaching the heights that it can, but I do have a soul, and I do have a soul that's capable of a lot. And that is a motivation and also something to be happy about, as he's going to talk about. So let's take a look at the text itself. Let's take a look at the text itself. Okay. So he says like this. So he says, afterwards, meaning after you are sad, you will come to true joy. Sorry, this thing is doing it wrong. Okay, you will come to true joy. Sorry, I'm just moving this video panel. Just driving me crazy. By reflecting upon the following positive meditation in your heart so as to give yourself a double measure of comfort. I want to also add here, notice how he says the following meditation. Remember, the Alter Rebbe is very much into meditation. Meditation is his thing. That's where he lives. He's always telling us about meditation. And so I just find it interesting and instructive that he's going to be talking about meditation because he always believes that's the key to emotions. So if we want to evoke positive emotions after we've come to sad emotions, we need a little bit of meditation. We need to think. So he continues. By reflecting upon the following positive meditation in your heart so as to give yourself a double measure of comfort, in the wake of your earlier meditation on the true but negative words mentioned above, the following will give you a double measure of comfort since A, or 1, your depression will now be gone. B, you will reach levels of joy that would not have been possible without depression. So this is a fascinating point. We're going to find out as we explore this chapter further that not only after you focus on the following meditations will your depression be gone, but you'll actually be happier than if you had never gotten sad. So let's continue. Say to yourself, what I said earlier, depressing meditation, is definitely true that I'm very far from God. As far from God as far as can be, as well as repulsive and disgraceful. All the things you said about yourself. Remember, because you said your body creates this distance from God. But that is only true with what I consciously identify as me, namely my body with its energizing soul. Nevertheless, within me is a piece of God literally, found even in the most religiously irreverent person, which is a divine soul containing an actual spark of godliness enmeshed in the soul to energize it. Only this divine soul is in a state of exile. And if this is the case, then I ought not to be depressed, but on the contrary, energized. Because the further I am alienated from God, and the more repulsive and disgraceful I become, it means the divine soul inside me is more deeply exiled, and the more greatly she is to be pitied. So he's saying you're going to arouse pity on your soul. The worse your situation is, the more pity you have on the soul. And the more you're going to want to do about it. Okay, you're going to have more pity. You have a more motivation. In other words, if someone is in a little bit of trouble, right? Let's say I'm running a fundraiser, okay? We talk about this in fundraising. In fundraising, you have to present the problem. In other words, if I just say, hey guys, if you don't give the donations, we won't be able to, we won't be able to provide an extra Purim meal. It's like, whatever, that's not exciting. If you have you have to create a problem. Now, the problems are real. You just have to be able to present it. So if you say, if the donations don't come in, then 100 families will not have a Purim experience, and 20 people in nursing homes will not be visited. Whatever. The point is that the bigger the situation, the more people are motivated to do it. You'll notice this in fundraising. Some people are better at it than others, but you have to be able to articulate the problem of what happens if you don't have the money, and that's the truth. There is a problem if you don't have the money. The other thing in fundraising is that it has to be relatable, but putting that aside, so putting that idea, right? If you think about what motivates you to give, a lot of time it's focusing on the problem. Hungry people in Israel, soup kitchens. Now Israel's getting a lot more money than they always do, right? It's a lot easier actually to get money when Israel's at war than when Israel's not at war, right? It's harder to sell it, right? In other words, it's harder to give money for soldiers when soldiers aren't at war. But when you say our soldiers are at war, if you don't give them the gear, their bulletproof vests are not going to work or whatever it is because they're old. That's a great selling point now, and people are motivated to act on it because they realize just how bad it is. When the greater the realization of how bad it is, the more pity you feel and the more you are energized to do something about it. And that's what we're saying here. Is since we've spent so much time, what the Tanya is arguing here is like this, is actually the more time you've spent knocking yourself, and knocking yourself meaning focusing on how much your body is dragging you down, the more pity you have on your soul and the more you want to do something about it. You want to release that soul. You want to unleash that soul. You want to do something for that soul. And so this is what he continues. He describes what the feeling is. So again, this is all the world of feelings. The feeling is, wow, it's so terrible. I want to do something about it. And so let's read it, Tanya. As he says, therefore, I will make it my singular mission and desire to get her out of this exile and bring her back up, returning her to her father's house in her youth, before she was placed in my body, when she was absorbed in God's blessed light and completely united with him. What we're saying here is your soul, before it came into your body, was united with God. Now it's come into your body. Not only is it stuck in this world where it doesn't feel that unification, but you've brought it down to places where it doesn't want to be. And so the Tanya says you should have pity on it and feel bad for it and be energized to do something about it. Now, too, she is going to be absorbed in and united with God when I will make Torah mitzvahs my singular mission. So, again, how do you help your soul? If you have pity on your soul, simple. Torah and mitzvahs. So he continues, to make all the divine soul's 10 faculties immersed in Torah and mitzvahs, as mentioned above, chapter 23, especially when I will devote myself to the mitzvah of prayer, to cry out to God in distress from the divine soul's exile in my repulsive body, to free her from imprisonment, to be attached to God. So he mentions all three major pillars of Judaism, which is Torah, mitzvahs, and prayer. So he says, this meditation lifts you out of the depressing thought of chapters 29 and 30 and recontextualizes them in a motivational and inspirational light. The humbling message of chapters 29 and 30 may be true, but they are only half the story, because the more repulsive and disgraceful your body and animal soul may be, the more you should have pity on your divine soul trapped there, and the more motivated you will be to do everything within your power to redeem it. So we haven't really seen joy yet, but we have seen, at the very least, the more you focus on how repulsive you are, and it's a very strong word, but that's what he uses, so I'm just saying it. But the more, let's talk about it in our lives, the more we can focus on how much, in other words, we need to spend time occasionally, if I'm not getting anywhere spiritually, to focus on my spiritual failings and what I'm doing to my soul and where I'm dragging my soul. And when I do that, then I am now feel pity for the soul and I want to do something for it. Again, my example of fundraising and charity for Israel, I think it's very instructive here. I think many of us, for good reason, we don't generally like to focus on our flaws. We don't generally like to spend time looking at our shortcomings. But the Tanya's argument here is that there is a benefit occasionally to focusing on your shortcoming and your flaws, because it can energize you to do something about it. Let's give an example. Let's give a human example. Let's say someone is going through life and they're not really accomplishing much. And then they someone is going through life and they're not accomplishing much. And then one day they decide, so they always tell themselves, you're a good person, you're a good person. But one day they decide to take stock of their life and realize that they're wasting time. And they have pity and because they know that they can do so much more. And so the Tanya tells us that can be a positive thing because you can now choose to change your life around. That's an energizing thought. So though we generally like to stay away from negative thoughts, there is on occasion a point of going there, not to stay there and not to use that as a motivation every single day, but sometimes to give a jolt and a jump start to our journey. Now, if you keep trying that jolt and the jump start and it's not working, then you need to speak to a mentor because obviously it's not working. And the answer is not to bring in more negative energy. We're talking about on a general standpoint. Sometimes you need to use that negative energy, focus on where you're failing to jolt you into action, to jolt you into pity on where you are in life. And then from there, go ahead and do something positive. It's probably like a movie scene in probably many movies or something, where people just sit around and say, what are we doing with our lives? What are we accomplishing, right? And then they get up and decide to do something. It's a similar idea here, just even more acute. You spend a lot of time focusing on how much your body is dragging you down, how much your ego is pulling you down, how sad it is for your godly soul. And that should energize you to want to save your godly soul. And again, it takes a meditation to think about where our godly soul was and where it is now. A lot of us don't think about our godly soul because we only think of us. We don't think about that general concept. But take a moment to meditate. This is a meditation to think about. So, practically, this is a moment to, he's giving us a practical idea to meditate on. Meditate every once in a while where your soul was in heaven, how blissful it was and how enjoyable it was to be basking in the light of God. And where is your soul now? Where are you bringing it? Because your soul goes everywhere you go and all the actions that you take. Where was your soul before? Where is it now? And that should have you pitying your soul and wanting you to do something about it. Okay. We are now ready to go to the next part of this chapter, which is a continuation, because we haven't really gotten to joy. So we've gotten to, so to speak, it's interesting. In this chapter 31, 29 and 30 were reasons to be sad, reason to be depressed. Then chapter 30 started off, we need a little bit of depression because you need to fight, it takes one to know one. You need to fight the klipa, the evil side, with a little bit of depression. Then he says we need to turn into bitterness, being bitter over your situation. And again, focusing not on how you're a failure, but what you can accomplish. And now we added another layer of from bitterness to pity. They're not exactly the same, but this is the three stages we've gone. We've gone to a little bit of sadness is good. Then we've gone to bitter as opposed to depression. Then now we've added pity. Okay. Now we're going to add joy, the joy in returning to God. And let's think about it like this. Let's start with this. Anybody here knows someone who became a Baal Teshuvah or who decided to change their life and become more religious or more traditional or get involved in Judaism more? It's not easy, right? Because it's accepting something upon you, even if it doesn't have to be that. Even if someone who didn't go to shul and now goes to shul every week, or someone who didn't go to class every Tuesday and now goes to class every Tuesday. On the one hand, when you choose to become more religious, you are accepting more restrictions in your life. You're taking away from your quote unquote free time. But many people will tell you, I don't know if everybody will tell you, many people will tell you that though it was hard, it was joyous, it was good, they were happy. They were happy they were doing this. So why would somebody be joyous and happy by adding restrictions to their life? Any thoughts? Why would somebody be joyous by... Yes.
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
This is the key. Yeah, it's the key to happiness. Discipline is the key to happiness. Example, we know that neuroscience research tells us that thing about a childhood
You're
that was discussed or talked about. The
okay.
neuroscience tells us that talking about that, for example, talking about a painful event from childhood and that's painful. So that's, do you understand what I'm saying? Like it's
Okay, right.
helping yourself.
But I'm asking not so much talking. I want to know someone who's now decided to structure their life more. So let's say they used to play video games. Now they're being more structured. They're doing more good things. Why would
That's
that
of
happen?
course.
So someone wrote here more fulfilling. Yes.
Well, this only borderline falls into that category. However, I quit smoking almost 2 months ago. It's a
Okay.
discipline. I feel much better. Um, and so that improved my life by having a discipline. Now, I know that doesn't exactly fit
Okay.
the question. Can you ask the question one more time with the same words?
In the same words, I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, or ask the question again.
All right. The question is a person like you or me who was more free in their life and then accepts upon themselves to be more committed to their Judaism, which automatically means more restriction, taking away from their free time. Why would that give them joy?
Because we stop hurting ourselves because God is about what's right for us, what's good for us. And so we stop hurting ourselves.
Okay, good. Anybody else?
So it's going to be specifically, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Who
No,
is
you go ahead. I will say what I'm gonna say
All right,
after.
you piggyback after. I'll go, then you go, then I'll go, then you go. Specifically about Judaism, I don't know that I totally buy the premise. um, for instance, let's say you take upon yourself making lighting candles for Shabbos, Friday night, and doing a ritual, whatever it may be, a kiddush, a motzi, little nitty yadayim, whatever, you take that on. Potentially, there's no downside to it. It's just the
right?
joy
So,
of doing it.
so Rick, you're correct, and I'm not necessarily focusing on. See, there you didn't really change much. You're doing a dinner. I'm focusing on things that you're going to accept upon yourself that will add restriction to your life. Maybe it's showing to a class, which does take away from your free time, even if you enjoy the class.
So
Yes.
I think and I'm talking about in my particular case, I
Mhm.
think that adding restriction to my life, it's like I'm setting boundaries and adding discipline to my life. Like I'm gonna give you an example that I used to use social media a lot more than I do it now. I used to have Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Right now, all I use is Facebook, and I have a time when I use it. I know, like every time that there's a notification, which I turn it off, by the way. Um, checking my social media, and it really makes me, I don't know, use my time much better because I have time to maybe do some reading, something else, go for a walk or whatever it is. It's a very good way for you to have.
Right. So if I were to rephrase what you're saying, if I understand it correctly, the restriction in your life actually made you freer.
Yes,
Yes.
that's a great
Yep.
way to put it.
Yes. Okay. Adam, yes.
Yeah, I see it as being having control. Okay, as opposed to being like a servant, as a more of a servant, like a slave. I mean, here we are servants of God, but not slaves of God. Whereas other people can see us, oh yeah, we're totally slaves of God. We do what we're told. Okay, that's the difference. The difference is control. We actually have the power of choice, which is really, really something very powerful. We're not controlled by our environment. We choose, and there's power in the choosing control.
Okay, good, good. Anybody else? Thank you, everybody. Anybody else before we launch into a thought here? Okay. So everybody has nothing's wrong. I'm just going to present a thought here. that the Tanya is going to put forth, or I believe the Tanya is putting forth. And it goes like this. It goes back to really to our two souls. We are pulled always in two different directions, one by our body, one by our soul. What is free for our body is not what's free for our soul. This goes to a lot of what some people were saying about fulfillment and choice and saying no to one thing and saying yes to another thing. So our body may be happy with the lack of restrictions, but our soul is not. But let's give an example. If a Rebbe is put in jail, which in Chabad happens every couple of years, right? If a Rebbe is put in jail, why is the Rebbe sad? The Rebbe is not sad because he gets less time to sleep and he doesn't get to watch his TV shows and he doesn't have the best food. He doesn't care about any of that stuff. He is sad because he feels he's on this earth to do his mission, which is spreading Judaism to other Jews. In other words, even if he could sit there and study and pray all day, he would be sad because he feels his mission, what he wants to accomplish, what his soul wants to shine to the world is lacking. That's what makes a Rebbe sad in prison. And the same thing would be for our bodies and souls. Our souls almost feel like they're in a prison when they're in the body. When the body gives into its every whim and will, though it's freedom for the body, it's torture for the soul. Because the soul, it's like being thrown into, it's like for a Rebbe to being thrown into a prison and having every creature comfort. Sure, you have every creature comfort, but that's not what a Rebbe is on this earth to do. A Rebbe is on this earth to spread Judaism. And as long as that Rebbe is not spreading Judaism, he doesn't feel happy. You have many people that can talk about this idea about feeling trapped, feeling they have so much to give and then they're not able to. It could be someone when they're sick in the hospital and they feel like that they want that freedom to be able to accomplish what they feel that they can accomplish, which we can get into another story about another time. So how do you feel your mission when you're in a hospital? But the point is that freedom for us would mean expression of the soul. And so when you allow your soul to express itself, so if you show up to that Tanya class, you can be happy because your soul is happy, because your soul is allowed to have its expression. So going back to the example, saying no to Facebook could mean saying yes to other things. Shutting off your phone on Shabbat could mean saying yes to your soul, and your soul will be happy. So there is a part of you that will be unhappy. That would be your body. Your animal soul might be unhappy for a certain period of time, but your godly soul will be happy. Now, Rick mentioned the Shabbat was an interesting example because Shabbat is actually very unique. Shabbat, or at least parts of Shabbat, I should say, maybe not all of Shabbat, but parts of Shabbat can actually make both the body and the soul happy. And there's a spiritual reason behind that, which we're not going to get into. But, so like saying, well, have a Friday night dinner, well, that's something that makes the body and the soul happy all at once. So that's why, a Friday night dinner, a Shabbat dinner is like almost a no-brainer. But there are other parts of our lives where you have to say no to the body in order to say yes to the soul. But this is why, Rick, I got that right?
So far, you're doing good.
Okay, thank you. That is why certain things in our lives that we take upon ourselves, though the road may seem difficult, and though I may be saying no to certain foods that I used to eat, and I may be saying no to certain parties that I used to go to, and I may be saying no to certain things I do Saturday morning because I'm going to services, or Friday night, or whenever you say yes to something, you're saying no to another thing, right? That's how it works. So when you're saying yes to coming to this Tanya class, you're saying no to other things that you could have been doing this time. But that's fine with you because those other things that you would say yes to would be saying no to your soul. And for your soul to be free is to come here, or I don't want to be egotistical, to study, to learn, to do something for your soul. And that is why many people who are Baal Teshuvah, who repent and return to God, there's a great joy, or there can be a great joy. I'm sure some parts of it are difficult, but there's a great joy in allowing freedom of their soul. And by the way, this concept can refer to anybody, even if you're religious, even like me. I don't do everything all right all the time. I have to say no to certain things that I want to do. And I have to learn as well that when I say no to those things and I'm saying yes to my soul, I'm allowing my soul to be free. And that gives it the joy that it wants. And that gives it the joy. And that's what gives it the joy. And this is why this is the second stage of of after your depression. He's basically going to say like this: after you're depressed, and after you have pity on your soul, now you're going to free your soul. And the joy and freedom is commensurate to how imprisoned it was, right? So the
Yes.
more shackled you were, the more joy there is in the freedom. So
Yes.
if you were right, Rabbi Chunya?
Yes.
Yes. So the more your soul is imprisoned, the more joy there is in the freedom that you give it. So let's give an example, because I don't want to get to the all or nothing proposition, because people might say, well, Rabbi, you mean I have to become religious in order for full joy? No, I would tell you like this. Going back to earlier in the chapter, we spoke about who knows how to judge people. If you focus on how you're born and how you grow up and the religiosity that you grew up with, and really how difficult it is for your soul to free itself. So even to show up for a 1 hour Tanya class is such great freedom for your soul. It's so happy and impressed and feels such joy, that there's so much reason to be joyous right now, even if you don't do everything right all the time. In fact, the fact that you don't do everything right all the time is more reason to be happy right now. Okay. Any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, how does it work for sometimes people, they set this restriction in their lives and they expect results like immediately. And if they don't see the results immediately, they get discouraged. Like what would you tell them?
The answer is two things. First of all, they say expectation is the mother of frustration, but that's for a therapist to spend time with them, or if I'm giving them a therapy session. But the second thing I would say is always focusing on the moment. Focusing in the moment will always give you freedom. So, for example, if I had planned to wake up at 6 because I wanted to accomplish so much today, and I woke up at 7, I have to focus on what I'm going to do right now, not on what I didn't get done, but what I'm going to do. There are many tips and hacks to focus on the moment. Sometimes I make myself to-do lists, and because I know, like, if you have a to-do list in your mind, you're always feeling like you never accomplished anything. But if you have a to-do list on paper, and you still, even though you see the things you didn't do, you actually see that if you accomplish even 50% of those things, it's really cool and really nice, right? So, there are tips and hacks to be able to focus on the moment, but that's really what it is always remembering that the only choice we have is right now. And so, as bad as it's been till now, I have a choice to free my soul right now. It's like you approach a guy in this, you approach somebody on the street and say you want to put on stones. I'm not so religious. I'm not so this. I'm not so that. And we tell them, but who cares? But right now, you have the opportunity to free your soul. You have an opportunity to allow your soul full expression. Who cares what you did before or do after? I hope that someone answers the question. But it's a constant battle, because don't forget, your animal soul is always there trying to make you depressed, because it knows if it gets you depressed, that it's going to win.
What you just said about writing things down, like have it like your list, that actually works great for me, and I do it all the time because I feel like if I write it down, I am more likely to do it. I don't know why, but I have always been this way. Well, that works really well for me.
Yeah, if anybody wants, I'll give my free hack right now. I do this at night. I do sometimes, not always. I talk to ChatGPT. I tell it all the things I want to accomplish the next day. I say, give it to me in a list.
Talk to who?
A ChatGPT, AI. I talk to ChatGPT. I hate typing. So I talk to ChatGPT and I tell it all the things I want to do. I say, make a list for me. It makes the list. I put the list in my on my phone, whatever. I copy and paste it somewhere else, and I just check off things as I do them. Anyways, it's just a hack. Some people like to write. What can I say? All right. Well, actually, I don't mind writing. I just don't
I
have the
do
time.
like writing much
I
better.
like I should back up. I do like writing. I don't usually have the time. So it's a lot quicker to talk to text. Anyways, and they can also make it as in a list format for you. That's the benefit.
If I put it on my phone, I won't do it. I have to
Okay.
have it.
Someone told me, I was speaking to someone else the other day. They said, it's tools are just tools. You have to know what works for you. But anyways, that's why I said, like, you asked me the question. I said I gave a couple tips, but how to live in the moment everybody might have to find their own specific thing that's going to work for them. Okay. Let's take a look at the text of the Tanya itself. So the Tanya text says like this. This approach to worship is characterized by the saying teshuvah, repentance, and good deeds. Normally, teshuvah and good deeds are perceived as two different activities. You try your best to do good deeds, but when you fail and do a bad deed, you repair the shortcoming with teshuvah. But in the above meditation section 3, teshuvah can be understood not as a correction for bad deeds, but as a goal of good deeds. Since these good deeds are done to return your divine soul, which is a piece of God, back to the source and root of all words. In other words, very fascinating. We usually think of teshuvah as repentance. I have to make up for my bad deeds. Here he's saying even if you did nothing wrong, just bringing your soul back to connection to God alone is called teshuvah. So this is what he continues. Usually translated as repentance. Teshuvah can also mean return of the soul to its rightful place. If every time you do a mitzvah, good deed, your intention is to redeem your divine soul from captivity in your body and return it to God as above section 3, then your good deeds are a form of teshuvah. Then he continues. And this ought to be your lifelong task done with great joy, the joy of the soul. The joy of the soul. And this is the joy of the soul on its release from a disgraceful body, returning to her father's house as in her youth, which happens during Torah study and worship. As our sages of blessed memory taught, you should be all your days in teshuvah. At the literal level, the Talmud is referring to teshuvah as repentance for sins. Since you want to make sure that you repent before you die and you don't know when you're going to die, the Talmud advises you to be all your days in teshuvah. But according to the Tanya's understanding of teshuvah here, the redemptive soul property of every mitzvah can read the Talmud hyper literally, regardless of whether you're repenting or not. You can literally be all your days in teshuvah by observing mitzvahs which return your soul to God. So each and every single one of us, whether you're religious or not religious, whether you're born religious, you're not born religious, whatever your scenario is, we all need to do teshuvah. What does teshuvah mean? Returning our soul to its rightful place. And that's something we have an opportunity to do every single moment. And here it continues. And there is no greater joy than the release from exile to captivity. And this is what I said earlier, that the bigger, the worse you are, the greater of a joy it is when you bring your soul to God. Now we can appreciate why the depressing meditation of chapter 29 and 30 leads to increased joy afterwards. In the spirit of the verse, in every sadness there will be profit. The more you come to realize from your depressing introspections how the body represents a tragic captivity for the soul, the more you will be joyous at the soul's release every time you do a mitzvah or study Torah. Like the joy of a prince who is kept in captivity, doing debasing work, grinding in prison, disheveled with dirt. Then he goes free back to his home, his father, his king. So here he gives an example. If you were a prince and you were put in prison, and in other words, a regular person in prison when they get out is happy. A prince in prison when he gets out is even more happy. When the prince lived at home before he went to prison, he was joyous. But the joy of returning to the palace after the imprisonment is so much greater. Similarly, the fact that your divine soul is held captive in your repulsive and disgraceful body should not be cause for sadness at all, because every time you release your soul through a mitzvah, its joy is far greater than anything it experienced before entering the body. So I'm not giving you a reason to sin so that you should then allow your soul more joy when you release it, but it's an interesting thing. Then he continues. And even though the body remains repulsive and disgraced, as in the Tikkun Zohar's reference to the body as the serpent skin, since even in a... All right, so here's going to another point, which I have to preface, really. Here's going to the next point. So here's his question is like this. He's going to say like this. He's going to say, all right, I get it. When I return my soul to God, there's a great joy because I'm returning it from a prison, from a very terrible place. But his question is, when I do that, when I return my soul to God, the body is still the body. So going back to my example of the bird covered in the dog feces, right? The dirt is still there while the bird is singing. And it is possible, his point here is going to be, it's possible to be joyous even though you're still covered in dirt. In other words, let's put it more practical. Let's say when I do a mitzvah, I know myself that I haven't changed so much, okay? I'm still the same old me. Okay, I'm doing something right now. I'm doing a good thing right now. But between me and the lamppost, everybody knows I'm not a great person, okay? Let's say I have my moral failings, I have my issues, and I'm pretty sure that after I do this mitzvah, I'm going to fall down there again. I'm pretty sure that after this moment of clarity, I'm going to be right back to where I was before. And in fact, even now, I know that my nature hasn't really changed much. You know, it's like, you look at people in Yom Kippur, we all try to feel like we're becoming different, but many of us don't change much. You can see it how people run for the bagels right after Yom Kippur. You know how much has changed. Unfortunately, I'm not saying we shouldn't change, but even if we do change, are we going to change overnight? Are we really going to become so different overnight? So how can there be joy? How can there be full joy in this moment? And his answer is going to be, what are you going to focus on? What are you going to focus on? That's going to be his point. His point is, when I'm doing a good thing, I am not ignoring the other parts of myself, but I am, as I say, putting first what's first. I don't want to say focusing on the positive, focusing on what's important. I am focusing on, in the scale of things, my soul is much more important. My soul is what I really am. And my soul should dictate if I'm happy or not. Let's take a look here at the text. So he says like this: even though the body remains, let me make this full screen. I don't know how to do that. Okay. Even though the body remains repulsive and disgraceful, as in the Tikkun Zohar's reference to the body as the serpent's skin. So he's saying, even though when you repent, the body remains the body, it hasn't changed. Right? Since even in the Beinoni, the animal soul's deep core has not been transformed to good, which would enable it to be incorporated in holiness, nevertheless, focus instead on your divine soul and let it be precious in your eyes. The focus on the deep core means my personality hasn't changed. But he's telling you, focus on your divine soul and let it be precious in your eyes. Let that be the focal point of your life. It's like you tell someone who has general difficulties in their life. They don't have a lot of money, they live in a small house, but they have wonderful children. You tell them, I can't change the other elements of your life. I can't change how much money you're making. I can't change your house. But you have wonderful children. Focus on what's important, right? We tell people all that all the time. The Alter Rebbe is saying the same thing. Though there is good reason to be sad over your spiritual state, and your spiritual state is unlikely to change on a whole because your animal soul and your body and your personality is still deep, deep, deep in the wrong place. But right now, focus on your soul. Be joyous in your ability to redeem her, and let that joy mean more to you than your concern over the disgusting body, so that the joy, this doesn't mean, by the way, that Judaism has a bad look on the body, which we're going to get to at the end of the chapter. Okay, so don't think Judaism repulses the body. But he's saying, even in this moment when you want to focus on the evil and the bad of the body, which there's a way to make it good, but we'll get to that soon, so that the joy of your soul will be your primary focus and you won't allow it to be compromised and confused by the sad state of your body. That's what he's saying. So he's saying that you can be happy because you will focus on what's important in your life, and that you have always the ability to free your soul and to return it and bring it closer to God. So though there is reason to be sad over your spiritual state, you always have reason to be happy as well. And to me, this statement is so powerful, because this really talks to us all, because it's telling you to be realistic. It's telling you that even in the moments when you're spiritually uplifted, It doesn't tell you don't be realistic. Don't think you become a changed person. Know who you are, but you can be joyous nevertheless in what you have in this moment. Any questions or comments before I go to the last part? No? Maybe I won't go to the last part. Maybe I'll just tell a quick story. So, quick fascinating story I saw yesterday. There's I found it online. It's this video of a Nova survivor from the Nova Festival. And he hid in one of the toilet stalls. Now, anybody who watched the Nova Festival knows that the terrorists shot up all the toilet stalls. Somehow he and 3 other people survived in this toilet stall at Nova. And he promised that if he gets out of there, he will return to Hashem. And today he lives in Mea She'arim, which is what they call the ultra-Orthodox area of Israel. And he's with a total garb. It looks totally different. And he's changed around his life, totally changed around his life. And so in Israel, there's, the secular and the religious hate each other much more. So they have a point in the video where they ask the mother, they tell the mother, they say, what do you think about your son? He's become all religious on you, all this, all that. She says, listen, I don't care. The main thing is that I have my son. That's the most important thing to me in my life. I want to have my kid. He's religious, he's not religious, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? Why am I saying this? I see this with a lot of, it's just so interesting. A lot of families, whether it's parents to children or children to parents, sometimes there's this animosity that happens when one becomes religious or the other way around. And people are forgetting what we just read in this section, is that focus on the important thing in life. You have your parent or you have your child. So many people don't. So many people don't have loving parents or loving children. It's like sometimes I see these stories and like, why get all uptight about it? Why all the angst and anger but again, it all comes from people not focusing on what's important in life. It all comes from not focusing on the bigger blessings and the bigger picture of our lives. And that's one takeaway that I want to take away from this chapter. Though in general, the chapter had its general lesson of, we went from sadness to bitterness to pity and now to joy at the freedom of the soul, to the joy. The worse you are, the greater joy it is for the soul to be able to connect to God. But the final lesson we had here was also make the main thing, as they say. Focus on what's really important in life and don't let the small failures and the small difficulties and the small reasons to be sad to drag you down and get you down, because they are not the most important part of your life. And that's the final lesson of today's chapter, is let's focus on the main thing and keep the main thing. And then there will always be reason, or there hopefully always will be reason for joy. So thank you for coming, and I'll stop the recording here.
I did have a question.
Thank you. Just one second. Let me stop the recording.